climate issue, although we have a broad sustainability objective. And so in the Australian context, at the moment there's international negotiations trying to make some difference on the climate issue, but our whole model is flawed. The idea is to play chicken with the climate to see how far you can go towards dangerous climate change. We believe that what the world needs to be doing is actually restoring a pre-industrial temperature and ocean acidity, the climate conditions in the pre-industrial period. It can be done, and it can be done through a number of strategies relatively quickly. But the international negotiations are not leading in that direction. They're premised on the idea of an all-in agreement as the first point of departure, if you like, to try to get everybody to agree. So that's Australia is one of the largest coal exporters in the world, Saudi Arabia is one of the large oil exporters in the world, and the list goes on. It's not entirely surprising that the agreements that have come out internationally are pretty weak and not really going to get us to a safe climate anytime soon. Another way to go is to encourage cooperative unilateralism, for countries to just simply decide that they will act in the interest of creating a safe climate domestically, and that they will restructure their economies to do that. If you start to do that, then people develop the techniques for doing it, the methods, they have to think the issues through, they create the beginnings of the industries that will support that new economy. And you can see in Germany that they've essentially started to do that, where they've developed the solar industry to an extraordinary degree. It's very strange that a very unsunny place like Germany can do that and Australia can't. So we believe in the idea of cooperative unilateralism to jump straight to an economy that's committed to a safe climate. So zero emissions to draw down the excess carbon dioxide. If you can do that, then other countries can join in, and eventually you can in fact have a total worldwide agreement. Thanks.
The reason that I'm wearing this armband and this beanie in the colour purple is for Wear It Purple Day today, which is a global initiative. It's standing in solidarity with all of the rainbow youth worldwide who are experiencing homophobia and discrimination in schools. I'm calling for Australia to lead the way on sex education, and the Australian Sex Party have a sex education policy that where we want national, comprehensive, accurate, developmentally appropriate information from kindergarten right through to year 12, and we want it to cover things that are overlooked, such as homophobia, such as abortion, such as assertiveness. It should be appropriate for people of all sexual orientations. When I was at school, it wasn't. We need sex education to be empowering young people to be positive, to be able to understand issues like consent, peer pressure, the emotional aspects of sex and respect. It's absolutely vital. We don't want children to be learning about how to treat others from the dark recesses of the worst of the internet. And so we also want a national internet education scheme for parents so that they can protect their children and equip them, both themselves and their children, to be able to maturely deal with and process all of the media that's out there, because it's not going to disappear. Sex education should address sex and gender diversity and identity. Youth suicide is just absolutely shocking. It's on the rise. It's the primary cause of death for people in Australia aged 15 to 24, and it's going up. We're also calling for a secular education system with comparative religion and ethics classes as opposed to religious instruction in schools. Spirituality is a very personal thing. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. Young people are still working things out for themselves, and they should be, again, empowered and not indoctrinated when they're in school trying to make sense of the world. We want qualified counsellors in schools as opposed to chaplains. Check out our website.
Thank you. So, I've got three global issues as it happens, and I'll say a few words about overseas aid and Australia's standing in the world. But what could be more global than climate change? So, we're in a difficult position now because we can see 8 years later quite a lot of what Al Gore predicted in his film An Inconvenient Truth is actually taking place. The Arctic is melting, the permafrost is thawing. We just had our hottest July ever, and a little bit of global warming's nice in spring, but wait till February. So I think we also had Bill McKibben out talking here, and he explained that Australia has a third of the coal required to lift global temperatures by the agreed 2-degree maximum safe increase, which may well be not quite safe. So Australia has a lot less than a third of the world's population, but we have a third of the coal required to create that increase. And Australia isn't leading, but the United Church is leading in selling off its shares in the coal and fossil fuel industries. And Christine Milne and the Greens have called for Australia to sell off its shares and holdings in the Future Fund, which is about 3% of the Future Fund, in fossil fuel stocks. The Greens would like a $2 a tonne tax on coal exports. And it's due to Adam Bandt winning the seat of Melbourne in 2010 that instead of a Citizens' Assembly, we got a multi-party committee which led to a carbon price. And full credit to the ALP and Greg Combet for seeing it through and providing that. But remember, if Adam Bandt hadn't been elected just south of here, we wouldn't have it now. So, just briefly on overseas aid, this is something that should be increased, but unfortunately it was just decreased to channel more funding into offshore processing of refugees, something that the Greens would like to reverse. And I think it's important now that we're going to be chairing the UN Security Council that we pay more attention to our responsibilities as the richest country in the world.
I agree with much of what Philip and Tim have said about the urgency of climate change. It is the great moral challenge of our time, and our efforts internationally ought to be directed at encouraging the United States, China and developing nations to take action to reduce their carbon emissions, both because that is absolutely essential to getting global reductions and global change, but also because if we can't get them to act, that will undermine community support for action here in Australia. I also support action concerning aid. In the area of food security and population growth, we have a situation where over 1 billion people are starving right now. Their water supplies are inadequate. We have global population growth of 80 million a year and are tracking for 10 billion people by 2050. Clearly these are major problems, and part of what Australia can do goes to our aid budget, which I have advocated increases to up to the 0.7 UN target. Tim suggested the aid budget is reducing. It is not. It is increasing by $500 million or 10% every year, and Australia is a leader in increasing our aid budget at a time when others are reducing theirs. The third point I'd talk about is nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament. I chaired an inquiry by the Parliament's Treaties Committee into this issue, and it is still blindingly obvious when you look at what is happening with North Korea and Iran and the like, that there are very serious problems here, and we need to do everything we can to rid the world of nuclear weapons.
If we want to be taken seriously on climate change, then we need to act as leaders and not like troglodytes, because we actually have one of the biggest greenhouse gas emissions in the world per capita. So what that actually means is that we should start here and not wait for the US or any other countries to start reducing emissions. One way we can do that is actually also by setting an example by punishing corporate polluters. We need to phase out coal immediately, no new coal power plants whatsoever. And instead of we're sticking to a discredited and hopelessly inadequate emissions trading scheme, we should actually massively invest in renewables so we can actually show to the world that it is possible to have 100% renewable energy in 10 years. And we know that's not a fantasy because the technology exists, we just need the political will. We also support a massive increase in foreign aid to poor countries for climate mitigation and adaptation strategies. The second key point I want to raise is that we support a foreign policy that is based on mutual respect and not on an imperialist and colonial mentality as we have today. We do not support participation in unjust wars or occupation, and as a matter of fact, we also don't support repressive regimes such as the Rajapaksa regime in Sri Lanka. We do not support a military intervention into Syria, and we call for an immediate troops withdrawal from Afghanistan. We need to boycott Chogam in Sri Lanka, and Socialist Alliance fully supports the independence movements in West Papua, Palestine, and for the Tamils. The spy base, Pine Gap, needs to be closed. It is partly responsible now for helping to target drone strikes overseas, so we are partly responsible for collateral murder overseas. We also think that ASIA should be abolished. It's an unelected, unaccountable secret service that spies on our population and is also responsible for locking up asylum seekers indefinitely. And we also oppose the illegal data sharing, the PRISM scandal that just happened.